Elliot had never imagined he would find himself in the middle of an alien world. The cold moon he had landed on was nothing like Earth. It was barren, lifeless, and silent, except for the faint hum of his equipment and the occasional distant crack of a missile's explosion. As part of the reconnaissance team, his job was simple: gather intel, stay under the radar, and get back to the ship without being noticed. It was supposed to be an easy mission, but as usual, things had gone horribly wrong. A Jetal patrol had discovered them, and in a matter of moments, Elliot found himself separated from the rest of his team, hiding alone in the wreckage of an abandoned station. The Jetal were known for their ruthless conquest of planets. No one had truly understood them, at least not in a way that made them less terrifying. They were larger than humans, with sleek, angular bodies covered in smooth, dark, armor-like skin. Their eyes were a deep amber that glowed like molten gold, and their faces, while striking, were alien in ways that made one shiver. Elliot didn't have much time to think about all that, though. He had to focus on surviving, on getting out of this mess. The sound of footsteps echoed nearby, sharp and rhythmic. He pressed himself closer to the cold wall of the station, his breathing slow and controlled. He had learned quickly in the past few months of this war that staying still was often the best choice. His heart beat steadily, a reminder that despite the odds he was still alive. Then he heard something different. A voice. "You're very quiet, human!" It wasn't an ordinary voice. It was melodic, yet sharp, and it carried an authority that made Elliot freeze in place. His mind raced. Jetal. The voice sounded close. Far too close. He hadn't expected to encounter one so soon, and certainly not one who would speak to him. In all his years as a soldier, he had only heard tales of the Jetal warriors, powerful, unyielding, merciless. But as the footsteps came nearer, Elliot slowly lifted his head, careful to remain hidden, his eyes locked on the figure that stepped into his line of sight. She was everything the stories had told him to expect, and more. The alien woman stood tall and imposing, her posture straight and proud, her movements graceful yet full of strength. She wore a battlesuit, dark and reflective, her skin shimmering faintly beneath the surface. There was something about her, something almost magnetic, that made Elliot's heart skip a beat. Her face was angular, with high cheekbones and a sharp jawline. Her golden eyes scanned the surroundings, and then, to Elliot's shock, they met his. He held his breath, frozen as she regarded him with a look that was both curious and calculating. Her lips curled into the faintest of smiles, a gesture so slight yet full of confidence that it sent a jolt of unease through him. "Who do you think is sexy, human?" she asked, her voice low but unmistakable. The question seemed to hang in the air between them, a strange challenge in her tone. Elliot blinked, momentarily stunned by the absurdity of the question. It wasn't what he had expected. It was nothing like the intense stares or threatening commands that he had prepared for. But even as his mind raced for a response, his body couldn't help but react. He felt heat rise in his chest, his throat going dry. This was not how things were supposed to go. For a moment he considered playing it safe, maybe deflecting the question, maybe telling her it didn't matter. But something about her presence, something about the way she spoke, made it impossible to lie. There was no escaping the reality that he was facing a being far beyond anything he had encountered before. This was no ordinary soldier, no nameless enemy. She was something else. So, without thinking, he answered truthfully, "I think I am." The words left his lips before he could stop them. The statement was bold, almost reckless, but it was the truth. There had been moments during the war when he had felt alone, when doubt had crept in, and yet he had always told himself to stand tall, to fight for survival, to believe in himself. It was something his father had taught him long ago. Believe in your strength, even if no one else does. Her expression didn't change at first. She simply stood there, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. Elliot's heartbeat quickened, but he didn't look away. If he was going to die today, he figured, at least he could die with some dignity. Then a soft chuckle escaped her lips. It was quiet at first, barely audible, but then it grew louder, full of amusement. It wasn't mocking, though. There was something different in it, a genuine curiosity, perhaps even admiration. "You think you are—" she mused, her voice carrying an edge of humor. "How interesting." For the briefest of moments, Elliot's breath hitched, and instinctively, he took a step back, his body tensing, ready for anything. But the alien woman didn't strike or threaten him. Instead, she tilted her head, studying him with an almost calculating gaze. "I've never met a human like you," she said, her voice softening.
"You're not afraid. You don't tremble in the face of death."
Elliot clenched his fists, unwilling to show weakness. His mind raced. He knew he couldn't let her see how vulnerable he was, how much fear lurked beneath the surface. But the truth was, he was scared. Scared of what she might do. Scared of the power she wielded with just a glance. He was a soldier, but that didn't make him invincible. It just meant he knew how to survive. "I'm not afraid of you," Elliot replied, his voice steady. "I've faced worse than this." The alien woman regarded him for a long moment, as if contemplating his words. The silence between them was thick with tension, a strange energy building that Elliot couldn't quite explain. He had never felt so aware of another person before, so utterly captivated by someone so alien, yet so human.
"You're not afraid," she repeated, her tone almost thoughtful. "But you should be." With that, she turned away, her movements fluid and graceful.
She walked toward the entrance of the station, her long strides echoing in the empty space. Elliot stood frozen, still, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. His heart pounded in his chest, and the question she had asked him repeated over and over in his mind. "Who do you think is sexy, human?" Her words lingered, and he felt an odd sense of unease. He didn't know what to make of her, what to think about her strange challenge. It wasn't the kind of question he'd ever expected from an enemy. It wasn't the kind of question any soldier had ever been asked on the battlefield. He watched her disappear into the shadows of the station, her figure vanishing as if she had never been there. And for a long time he stood still, his thoughts racing. Who was she? And more importantly, why had she asked him that question? The days after that strange encounter felt like a blur to Elliot. He couldn't shake the memory of the alien woman's question. Her golden eyes locked onto his as she asked him what should have been a meaningless, trivial question.
Who do you think is sexy, human? It wasn't just the question that bothered him. It was everything about her. The way she moved, the way she spoke, and most of all, the way she made him feel.
The Jetal were his enemy, yet in some strange, almost surreal way, she didn't seem like an enemy at all. Elliot spent most of his days alone, hidden deep in the wreckage of the abandoned station. It was the only place where he could remain out of sight. His squad had been scattered, and he had no idea if they were still alive. The only sounds he heard were the faint whir of his communications equipment and the occasional tremor as distant explosions rocked the moon's surface. Still, he couldn't afford to think about the war. Not now. Not when his every move could be his last. He had barely slept since the incident. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face again. Seraphis, he realized, remembering the name he had overheard when she spoke to someone on her communicator. Seraphis. The name sounded ancient, regal, and somehow fitting for someone so powerful. It made him wonder even more about her and what she was doing on this desolate moon. Why was she so interested in him? A human soldier? What had drawn her attention? For the first time in days, Elliot decided to move out of his hiding spot. He couldn't stay holed up in this wreckage forever. He needed food, water, and any intel he could gather about the Jetal forces. He made his way cautiously through the twisted ruins of the station, always alert for signs of movement. It was on the fourth day after the encounter that he saw her again. At first, it seemed like just another patrol. Elliot had seen them before, the Jetal warriors marching with their weapons drawn, scanning the terrain. He had learned to stay out of sight. But then, his breath caught in his throat. There, standing at the entrance to the wreckage, was Seraphis, her amber eyes scanning the surroundings. She was alone. Elliot didn't know what to do. His first instinct was to hide, to retreat back into the shadows where he had spent the past few days. But something stopped him. Something told him that if he left now, he might never get another chance to understand her, to find out why she had come to him, why she seemed so different from the others. Before he could think too much about it, she turned toward him. Her gaze found him instantly, and for a moment, Elliot was sure she could see right through him. "I've been waiting for you," she said, her voice cool and calm. There was no trace of anger, no threat in her words, just an almost unnerving certainty. "I knew you would come." His heart pounded, his mind racing. This wasn't how he imagined this encounter would go. It wasn't like any enemy soldier he had faced before.
"I didn't come for you," Elliot replied, his voice steady despite the surge of fear inside him.
"I came for information!" Seraphis raised an eyebrow. "Information!" she repeated. "You think you'll find that here? You think you'll learn anything by running and hiding?" Her words cut through him like a blade. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. Not anymore. Elliot stepped forward, keeping his eyes locked on hers. "I'm not running from anything," he said, his voice low and unwavering. "But I'm not going to just stand here either." Seraphis tilted her head slightly, intrigued by his boldness. She took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You're a strange one," she said softly. "Most humans would have been terrified by now. Most would have begged for mercy." Elliot didn't flinch. "I'm not most humans." She smiled, a small but genuine smile that caught him off guard. There was something almost human about it, something that didn't belong to the alien warrior in front of him. He realized then that there was more to her than met the eye. She wasn't just a ruthless conqueror, not just a soldier following orders. There was depth there, something beneath the surface that made her more than just an enemy. "I asked you a question last time," she continued, her voice growing softer. "Do you remember?" Elliot nodded. "You asked me who I think is sexy. And you gave me an interesting answer," she said, her smile widening ever so slightly. "You said I think I am." Elliot's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't forgotten. He hadn't expected her to bring it up again. But then again, maybe he should have known. Seraphis wasn't the kind of person to forget things easily. "Why do you keep asking that?" Elliot asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Why would that even matter? Seraphis looked at him for a long moment, her golden eyes filled with something unreadable.
"It's not about what you think of me," she said slowly.
"It's about what you think of yourself." Elliot frowned. "What does that mean?" "You humans," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "You are so full of doubt, so full of fear. But you also have this. Strength. This confidence. You cling to it, even when everything around you is falling apart." Elliot didn't know how to respond. He'd always thought of himself as just another soldier, just another cog in the machine. But the way she spoke, the way she looked at him, it made him question everything he had ever believed about himself. "Why do you care?" Elliot asked, his voice hoarse. "Why do you even want to know what I think?" Seraphis didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped back, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something. "You're different," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't fit the mold."
"You don't think like the others? It's interesting."
Elliot didn't understand. Was this some kind of game to her? Or was it something else? He could feel the tension between them, the pull of an invisible thread drawing them together, even though they were enemies, even though they were supposed to be at war. I don't know what you want from me, Elliot said, his frustration mounting. I'm just trying to survive. Seraphis turned back to face him, her expression softening slightly. Maybe you're not the only one who's trying to survive. There was a long pause, and for a moment, it seemed like time stood still. Elliot felt his mind racing, trying to make sense of everything. The war, the Jetal, Seraphis. None of it made sense anymore. He had never expected to meet someone like her, someone who didn't fit the mold of the enemy, someone who might not be as different from him as he had assumed. But before he could ask another question, she turned away. I'll leave you to your thoughts, human, she said, her voice once again filled with that calm, distant authority. We'll see how long your bravado lasts. And with that, she was gone. Elliot stood there for a long time, his mind still spinning from their conversation. He hadn't expected any of it. He hadn't expected her to challenge him, to make him question everything he thought he knew about the war, about himself. But now, as he stood alone in the wreckage of the station, Elliot realized one thing for certain. He wasn't sure who he was anymore. And he wasn't sure where this strange, enigmatic alien woman would lead him. But he knew he had to find out. The days after their second encounter felt different. Elliot could no longer deny the strange pull he felt toward Seraphis. She was no ordinary enemy. There was something deeply unsettling and yet captivating about her. The more he thought about their conversations, the more he realized how little he understood about her, and about himself. His days were still spent hiding, waiting for an opportunity to reconnect with his squad or find a way off the moon. But something about the strange connection between him and Seraphis gnawed at him, making him restless. He couldn't help but wonder if she was just playing a game, trying to break him down mentally, or if there was something deeper at play. Elliot had always considered himself a practical man. He was trained to stay focused on the mission, to keep his emotions in check. But Seraphis had a way of disrupting everything. Her calm demeanor, her penetrating gaze, her unusual questions, everything about her was unlike anything he had experienced in his time as a soldier. Each day, as the sounds of war echoed faintly in the distance, Elliot found himself thinking more and more about her. She was unlike any enemy he had ever faced. She wasn't just a warrior. She was intelligent, composed, and, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, she made him question his understanding of the war. 2 more days passed in this unsettling routine, but Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that Seraphis was always watching, always waiting for something. He had learned to stay alert, his senses heightened every time he heard footsteps. But every time he expected it to be one of the Jetal patrols, it was always her. On the 3rd day, as he cautiously made his way out of his hiding spot, he found her once again waiting near the wreckage. This time, she didn't speak immediately. Instead, she stood silently, watching him with those penetrating amber eyes. Elliot's heart skipped a beat. It had become almost routine to see her like this, yet the tension never seemed to go away. She was always just a little too close. Still alive, human? Seraphis asked, her voice calm but laced with an edge of curiosity. Elliot nodded, trying to maintain his composure. You seem to be doing just fine yourself. She smiled, though it was barely perceptible. It was the kind of smile that spoke volumes, though Elliot had yet to decipher its true meaning. I find it fascinating, Seraphis said, her voice quiet but filled with an intensity that made Elliot shiver. How you continue to resist. You humans, with your fragile bodies and your fleeting lives, you survive by defying the inevitable.
Elliot swallowed, trying to steady his nerves. We do what we have to. Seraphis stepped closer, her figure looming over him.
What do you think you're doing here, human? Hiding, running from your enemies? No, Elliot replied, his voice steady. I'm surviving. It's different. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she was trying to understand him, to figure out what made him tick. Surviving? She echoed. That's all you're doing? I'm trying to stay alive, Elliot said, his tone firm. Not just for me, but for the people I care about. Seraphis tilted her head, studying him. people you care about, she repeated softly. That's an interesting thought. The way she said it made Elliot feel exposed, as though she could see through every layer of his defenses. I know what you're thinking, he said, his voice lower now, almost as if speaking to himself. You think I'm just another soldier, another pawn in this war. She didn't respond immediately, instead letting the silence stretch between them. But Elliot could feel the weight of her gaze. It was as though she was analyzing every word he spoke, trying to peel back the layers of his identity, to understand who he really was. You're not wrong, Seraphis finally said, her voice cool.
You are a soldier, but you're not just that.
You're something else. Elliot didn't know how to respond to that. The words she had spoken felt like a riddle he couldn't solve. But before he could ask her to clarify, she moved closer again, her presence overwhelming. I wonder, she mused, if you've ever truly thought about what you're fighting for. Elliot's brow furrowed. I know exactly what I'm fighting for. For freedom, for my people, for a future where we're not at the mercy of alien forces. Seraphis raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable.
Freedom? You think that's what this is about?
That's what you're fighting for? Isn't it? Elliot asked, confusion creeping into his voice. Freedom isn't something you can take by force, human, she said softly, her voice almost wistful. It's not something you can claim by war. Elliot was taken aback by her words. He had always thought of the Jetal as enemies, cold, ruthless conquerors who took everything in their path. To hear Seraphis speak so differently, so contemplatively, was jarring. I don't understand, he admitted. Seraphis took a step back, her eyes never leaving him. I didn't think you would. For a long moment, they stood there, the silence thick with tension. Elliot's mind raced as he tried to piece together the puzzle of Seraphis. She wasn't like the other Jetal warriors. She didn't think the same way. But what did that mean?
What was she trying to tell him?
Tell me something, Seraphis said suddenly, breaking the silence. Do you believe in the greater good? In doing what's necessary no matter the cost? Of course I do. That's what we've been fighting for all along. She seemed to consider his answer for a moment, then shook her head.
You still don't understand. You think you're fighting for the right thing, but you're just part of a cycle.
A cycle that's been going on for centuries. Humans. Jetal. None of you know how to stop it.
Elliot's chest tightened. Stop it? He repeated.
You're saying it can be stopped? Seraphis didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath and turned away, her gaze fixed on the horizon.
You're not the only ones in this galaxy, human. There are others. Others who understand what this war really is. They're the ones who will decide if it ends or not. You and I, we're just pawns. Elliot didn't know what to say. The weight of her words hung in the air, suffocating him. He had never thought of it like that before. He had always believed that the war would be won through strength, through firepower, through sheer determination. But now, Seraphis had made him question everything. Do you ever wonder, Elliot, she said softly, almost as if to herself, if we're fighting for the wrong reasons? If we're too blinded by our pride to see the truth? Her words echoed in his mind long after she had left. Elliot stood there, staring at the place where she had been. He had no answers, only more questions. Was she right? Were they all just pawns in a larger game? Could this war, this endless cycle of bloodshed, truly be stopped? As he stood there, lost in thought, he realized that nothing in this war, nothing in this universe, was simple. Every day he had fought to survive, to protect his people, to do what he believed was right, but now he wasn't so sure. There was a depth to Seraphis that he hadn't expected, something beyond her role as an enemy. And it terrified him. Elliot didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure if the future was something he could control, or if it was something that would control him. The days on the desolate moon grew more uncertain as Elliot continued to reflect on his strange encounters with Seraphis. Her words lingered in his mind like a shadow, following him wherever he went. She had made him question everything he thought he knew about the war, about survival, and about what it truly meant to fight for something. Despite the chaos of his circumstances, Elliot couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward her, a sense that there was more to her than the cold, ruthless soldier he had originally believed. Every time she spoke, she made him think differently, not just about the war, but about his own place in it. Elliot found himself thinking about her more often than he cared to admit. He hadn't expected to feel this way about an enemy, especially one so different from him. Seraphis was not just an alien. She was something else. There was a complexity to her, a depth that Elliot couldn't ignore. But his focus remained on survival. Even as the questions about the war and the Jetal swirled in his mind, his instincts as a soldier took over. He needed to find a way out. He couldn't stay hidden forever, and he knew he had to reconnect with his squad, or at the very least gather information on the Jetal's movements. Still, the memory of Seraphis haunted him, the way she spoke, the way she made him question everything. For a moment, he almost forgot that she was his enemy, that she had come to this moon with a mission to crush humans, to win the war for her people. But every time they spoke, there was something different about her, something that made Elliot wonder if her loyalty to her people was as strong as she claimed. One day, as the sounds of distant explosions echoed in the background, Elliot decided to venture out of his hiding place. He had been stuck in the wreckage for days, and it was time to move. His instincts told him it wasn't safe to stay in one place for too long, especially not with the Jetal patrolling the area. But as he stepped out into the open, a figure caught his attention. Seraphis. She was standing in the distance, her tall form silhouetted against the moon's pale light. She didn't appear to be armed, and her posture was different from the rigid, warrior-like stance she usually maintained. This time, she was relaxed, almost contemplative. It was as if she had been waiting for him. Elliot froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. He could feel the tension rising in his chest. It was one thing to hide from the enemy. It was another to confront them head-on. But there was something about Seraphis that made him feel as though he couldn't run from this moment. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, moving slowly toward her. As he approached, she turned toward him, her golden eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "You always find your way to me, human," Seraphis said, her voice calm but with an underlying hint of something deeper, something Elliot couldn't quite place. "I don't know if it's by choice," Elliot replied, his tone steady, "but I'm here now." She regarded him for a moment as if deciding whether to speak or not. Finally, she broke the silence.
"You're different from the others. The others fight because they have to, because they have no choice."
But you fight because you believe in something.
Elliot frowned. "I fight to survive."
That's all. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she was searching for something beyond his words. Survival. Is that all there is for you, Elliot? To live another day? His heart tightened at the sound of his name on her lips. It was the first time she had used it. It felt strangely intimate, as though she had crossed a line that separated them. But he didn't want to focus on that. "Survival is all any of us can hope for in this war," he said, his voice firm. "You can't afford to think about anything else when you're constantly fighting for your life." Seraphis took a step closer, her presence overwhelming. "You're raw," she said softly. "That's exactly what makes you different. You don't just survive. You question. You challenge what you're told, and that makes you dangerous."
Elliot's chest tightened.
"How am I dangerous?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a few steps around him, as if studying him, trying to figure him out. Elliot stayed still, his eyes locked on her. He wasn't sure what she meant by dangerous, but he wasn't about to show any weakness.
"You are dangerous because you don't accept the world as it is," Seraphis said, her voice almost contemplative. "You see something more."
Something that could change everything. "I don't see anything but the reality of the war," I'm just a soldier trying to survive. She stopped moving and looked at him. That's what everyone says.
But deep down, you know there's more at play here than just survival. Elliot felt a sudden wave of frustration.
What do you want from me, Seraphis? He asked, his voice rising slightly. I'm not some symbol. I'm not some hero in a story. I'm just trying to do what's necessary to stay alive. Seraphis's expression softened. You're more than that, Elliot. You always have been. But you won't see it until you stop letting your fear control you.
Elliot took a step back, the weight of her words sinking in. Fear.
She was right. He had been living in fear for so long that he couldn't remember a time when it hadn't dictated his choices. The fear of death, the fear of losing, the fear of being powerless. It had been his constant companion since the war began. But what if there was more? What if, in all his attempts to survive, he had lost sight of something more important? I don't know what you mean, Elliot said quietly, his voice hoarse. But I do know that I have to keep going. I can't afford to stop. I can't afford to think about anything else.
Seraphis looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a sigh, she stepped closer again.
That's what I thought, she said softly. You're so focused on surviving that you've forgotten how to live. He had heard them before, from other people. But hearing them from her, someone he barely knew, felt different. It made him feel vulnerable in a way he hadn't expected. I'm trying to live, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. But it's hard when you don't know what the future holds. Seraphis tilted her head, considering his words. Maybe you're looking at it all wrong.
Maybe you're too focused on what's coming next instead of what's happening right now.
Elliot didn't know how to respond to that. She was right, in a way. He had been so fixated on survival, on getting through the day, that he had lost sight of everything else. His purpose, his hope, his belief in something greater than just the fight. I don't know what to do with all this, Elliot said, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. I don't know how to keep going when everything seems so meaningless. Seraphis's gaze softened. She reached out, gently touching his shoulder in a rare moment of vulnerability. You keep going because you have to. Because somewhere deep inside, you know that you can't just give up. You'll find your way. For a long time, they stood in silence, the moonlight casting long shadows over them. The war was still out there, still raging, but in that moment, it felt like the world had stopped.
Elliot didn't have any answers.
But for the first time since the war began, he felt like he was starting to understand something. Maybe survival wasn't all there was. Maybe there was something more. Something worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, Seraphis was right. Maybe the real battle wasn't just about surviving. It was about finding a reason to live. With a deep breath, Elliot looked at her. What happens now? Seraphis smiled, a small, knowing smile. Now, we see if you can live without fear. And with that, she turned and began to walk away, leaving Elliot to process the weight of her words. He didn't know where this strange connection with her would lead, or if it would lead anywhere at all. But for the first time in a long time, Elliot felt like he might finally be ready to find out.